of wine for gatherings and celebrations all month long. More at Specs.com. Specs. The fun starts here.
New wreck up on the South Loop. It's westbound past Crestmont. I can see that live on camera. They're sitting in a left lane. Fog advisory expiring in 30 seconds. 79 for the high today. Sun. 63 for the low tonight. A little bit of fog maybe tomorrow morning as well. Mid-70s for the high. Slight chance of rain Tuesday night going into Wednesday. Better chance closer into the weekend, maybe Saturday. We're 66 on the beach in Galveston, 58 here. U of H winds are calm, humidity 100%, as you can imagine. Streaming live online at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Download our app as well. A lot of cool features there. KUHF Houston News 88.7. A service of the University of Houston, 9 o'clock.
The state of Texas is cracking down on teachers and schools that support student protests over immigration enforcement. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, an attorney who represents districts on what they legally can and cannot do.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, for years, educators made sure students had access to laptops and other tech. We'll talk with a Rice University professor and one of his students about efforts in their class to teach with no screens at all. Plus, it's the second Monday of the month. We field your gardening questions for Meg Tapp from the Garden Club of Houston. And while you were paying attention to the Olympics or the Super Bowl, you might have missed some Houston Rockets news. We'll catch you up. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Israel's cabinet has approved a series of measures to strengthen Israeli control in the occupied West Bank and weaken the powers of the Palestinian Authority. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
The new measures would allow the Israeli government and settlers to more easily purchase real estate in the West Bank. A cabinet minister who announced the decision said this would ensure land reserves for future Jewish settlement. The new measures would also grant Israeli authorities power to carry out demolitions in Palestinian cities administered by the Palestinian Authority. And Israel would have more control over two ancient religious sites. Jordan and Egypt condemned the move and warned against Israeli annexation of territory where Palestinians want a sovereign state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet President Trump on Wednesday at the White House to discuss Iran negotiations. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Funding for the Department of Homeland Security will run out at the end of the week unless Democrats and Republicans agree on new funding legislation. They're disputing new rules for federal immigration enforcement. Maryland Democratic Governor Wes Moore says the White House has rescinded his invitation to a dinner held with the National Governors Association. Moore serves as the vice chair of the association. He told CNN State of the Union that the action is highly disrespectful.
It's not lost to me that I'm the only black governor in this country. And I find that to be, particularly painful, considering the fact that the president is trying to exclude me from an organization that not only are my peers have asked me to help to lead, but then also a place where I know I belong in.
The National Governors Association is scheduled to hold its winter meeting this month in Washington. The group's executive director released a statement. He laments the White House's decision to limit participation in events around the governor's meeting and to make the event partisan. Stocks opened mixed this morning and amid a battle over weight loss drugs. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 170 points in early trading.
GLP-1 drugs can produce big gains and losses in the stock market as well as patients' waistlines. Stock and Wegovy maker Novo Nordisk is up this morning after the mail-order pharmacy Hims & Hers Health withdrew a cheaper knockoff pill. Hims & Hers was facing pressure from the Food and Drug Administration as well as a patent infringement lawsuit from Novo Nordisk. Stock in Hims & Hers is down. Kroger's tapping a former Walmart executive to be its new CEO. Greg Foran will take the reins nearly a year after Kroger's previous CEO stepped down following an investigation of his personal conduct. Tokyo's Nikkei average jumped nearly 4% overnight after Japan's governing party won a supermajority in weekend elections. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow's down 150 points. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. There's a new poll out this morning on the race for a U.S. Senate seat in Texas from the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston. Likely voters in the March 2026 Democratic primary appear to be favoring Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She leads with 47% of the vote. James Tallarico sitting at 39%. 12% are currently unsure of how they will vote. Early voting for the primary starts next Tuesday. Stay here to your local NPR station leading up to Election Day for the latest Texas political news. The Public Utility Commission of Texas is launching a study of data centers' water usage. News 88.7's Natalie Weber tells us the announcement comes as the state sees a boom in data centers.
Texas could lead the nation's data center market within a few years. That's according to Bloom Energy, a company that produces electricity for data centers. As the industry grows in Texas, some lawmakers want to know more about its impacts. State Representative Armando Wally is a Democrat representing North Harris County. He's behind the commission's study of data center water usage.
There's a favorable business climate, regulatory climate, but we also know that we have to be good stewards of our natural resources.
The commission will send a survey to data center facilities to assess their water usage. I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
Houston police are searching for a man who they say shot towards a restaurant that denied him service over the weekend, and that shot hit a woman. Police say that the suspect was in a group of people and didn't like the price of food. The cashier refused service after the interaction, and then the suspect threatened to go get his gun. Multiple outlets report that in total 8 shots were fired. When police got to the scene, the gunman had already left. And outside of the Super Bowl this weekend in sports, the Rockets beat the Oklahoma City Thunder 112-106. It was a big win for Houston, beating the team that won the NBA title last year. The Rockets are in 4th place in the Western Conference as we crawl closer towards the All-Star game. 63 degrees right now here on the UH campus. I'm Matt Harab.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and YouTube. Coming up this hour, shifting away from technology in the classroom, your gardening questions, and the Houston Rockets, as we just heard, beat the first-place Thunder after standing pat at the trade deadline. We discuss how they look ahead of next weekend's All-Star game. First, though, last week, hundreds of Houston-area students across multiple campuses walked out to protest federal immigration enforcement efforts. They joined peers statewide demonstrating after 2 U.S. citizens were killed in Minneapolis and amid months of aggressive enforcement crackdowns here in Texas. Those protests drew swift condemnation from state leaders who accused teachers and districts of facilitating the walkouts. The Texas Education Agency announced it will discipline teachers who help students protest. Governor Abbott called for arresting students who walk out and threatened to strip funding from schools that, quote, abandon their duty to teach our kids in the curriculum required by law. Attorney General Ken Paxton launched an investigation into Austin ISD for allegedly, quote, facilitating student protest against lawful immigration enforcement activities. Leslie Alvarez is a San Antonio-based education law attorney who works with districts statewide. She tells Houston Matters producer Mincho Jacob about the legal issues confronting districts, families, and students involved in protests.
We've seen this over decades of a form of protest, and there's been guidance year in and year out on how we respond to protests, and there's guidance on what we balance on the student rights, and so it's not new. The fact that we have additional scrutiny is what is scary, or what is making these situations a little bit harder for our administrators to handle. But that is why the recommendation or the advice is, we already have policies in place. Nothing has changed. Really, at this point, it's just a matter of communicating with, your staff and the community, informing them of, hey, these are our policies and the students need to follow them. These are our policies for our employees. Our employees need to follow them. I mean, there's been court cases on walkouts as a protected speech and freedom of speech. And so it's not new. I mean, it's something that has been around for a really long time, and it's just a matter of the additional scrutiny that we have right now, and just the media, and just the quickness of everything that is happening in the nation, really, that is, I think, making these situations harder for our schools to handle. But it's something that has been happening for decades as a matter of social discourse, and for people to advocate for things that are important to them.
And what have the courts typically said in regards to this kind of activity by students?
Yeah, the main Supreme Court case that generally we're going to refer to when we're talking about freedom of speech in the school context, Tinker held that students and teachers don't shed their constitutional rights to free speech when they walk into those school doors. It's not saying that students and teachers just have an absolute right to the freedom of speech, but it is saying, hey, you do still have your freedom of speech right. However, the school still is able to regulate that if the speech is disruptive, and there is a test that we apply to that. On that same note, there has been cases specifically for student walkouts where students are walking out, they get disciplined, and then parents bring a lawsuit to challenge that discipline based on the walkout and relating it back to freedom of speech. In those cases, the courts have held that the school district can discipline if they are disciplining for the conduct of being absent, or the truant conduct, not necessarily that they're disciplining the student for their act in protesting, but because they are walking out and they are leaving the campus, or they are, that within itself is a code of conduct violation, and the district retains the right to discipline a student for that conduct itself. And so again, it's going back to that balancing test in Tinker. Yes, teachers and students still retain their freedom of speech right. However, there are some restrictions that districts, schools, government has in regulating that speech.
What was the premise of Tinker that set up that case?
The students were protesting the Vietnam War by wearing a black armband. And so it was a simple act of, I'm going to wear an armband to greet, they were grieving what was going on. The school was disciplining them for the act of wearing the black armband. And so in this case, the court held the students were not disruptive. The act of them wearing a black armband wasn't disruptive to the school environment. And so just because they were wearing it in an act of political protest and they were disciplined for that, the court said that the school district violated the students' First Amendment rights. And so that is, of course, different than these situations where we actually have students walking out, and the act of them walking out is on its face a violation of the student code of conduct versus just simply wearing a black armband. But it did lay out, of course, that foundation that students don't shed their First Amendment rights when they walk into the school.
For families and students, I mean, I'm sure a lot of parents would say, hey, don't engage in that kind of behavior. But we've seen students for generations engage in this kind of protest. As a lawyer, if you were advising a family or a student who walked out, what are their rights and options right now?
As a parent, I mean, I think the biggest thing will be safety, right? If you are in an area where you feel that engaging in this sort of protest is going to put you or your child at risk. I mean, I think that's on a personal parental side. On a school discipline side, every district has, at least in Texas, we have a student handbook that parents receive at the beginning of the school year, or they should receive at the beginning of the school year. So maybe go back, look at the attendance side or the attendance section of the student handbook. Read up about excused absences, unexcused absences. Every district is going to have different policies on how you turn in, excused absences, or how you can check your student out, those types of things. So if you want to go about it that way, where you are supporting your student, and there may be a way that you can do that properly if you look at the student handbook and follow what the student handbook says about excused absences, non-excused absences, and checking your student out and those types of things.
Has there ever been a case of like school districts getting taken over or defunded or anything like that by the state for being accused of political or inappropriate behavior? I mean, in these kind of instances, is this kind of unprecedented territory? Is there a legal precedent here?
Not that I know of. When kind of twofold here. The first one is the funding. I mean, the simplest way to think about funding is the attendance, and I think that's where the defunding, at least to me, that's where that comes from if you don't have students attending. And so just for a general overview, schools are funded based on their average daily attendance, or at least a portion of their funding is coming from their average daily attendance. And so that is why attendance is important to schools, obviously, because students need to be in class to learn, but also because that is how a part of their funding is generated. And so when students are absent, that equates to there's no funding for that student for that day. Of course, it's an average, but that is where, when we talk about defunding and this particular form of protest of walking out, there could be a correlation between defunding and students walking out, simply because of if they're not in class, if they're not in school and they're counted absent, that is directly tied to the way that the schools are funded.
The TEA Commissioner Mike Morath issued guidance this week to schools and districts on how to deal with protests, deal with any walkouts. If schools feel that they're following that guidance, they should, in essence, feel okay in being in compliance with the TEA and with what leaders like Governor Abbott are asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are following your policy, your existing policy, in this particular situation, we're going to look at our truancy policy, our absent, how we handle absences, how we discipline for absences or skipping, right? That's the term that is most commonly used. If you are applying your policy appropriately and neutrally, you should be okay, because that is what, at least from the guidance I've seen from TA and the governor, I mean, that is what they are implying, or that is the core of their maybe there is some additional, maybe scare tactics in a way, but at the root of it is, if you are following your board policy and if you are following your practices and that you already have in place, you're going to be okay.
Threats of lawsuits, those kind of things happen at every level. I mean, people threaten lawsuits to achieve an end, even if that's not going to court. So, I mean, there is a cost of time and effort for districts, for families, for students to have to deal with anything. There is a chilling effect, I would imagine, from this kind of speech and from these kind of threats.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if from a parent perspective, from a employee perspective, any action that we are taking, and at least as legal counsel, I mean, we're always considering, even if we have the strongest case to win, balancing how much it's going to cost to even get to that win is definitely something that you consider. And then also, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into play when you are deciding which action to take. And yeah, I mean, there is a chilling effect on these types of court cases as well, if you do make it all the way, because I think a lot of these either settle or they don't even make it past the summary judgment phase. And it's really hard to sue school districts. So I think that that also, at least on the parent side, has some it's hard for them, right, to get through that process. And then on the employee side, that one's a little different, because they do have additional protections under their contract that they could file suit against under their contract and go through that process.
Leslie Alvarez is a San Antonio-based education law attorney who works with school districts across Texas. She spoke with Houston Matters producer Mincho Jacob. Up next, technology in the classroom was once touted as a critical teaching tool, but more teachers and schools are shifting away from teaching through tech, confiscating phones, and eliminating screens from the classroom. We talk with a teacher and a student about going back to old-fashioned lectures and note-taking as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hello, I'm Frank Billingsley.
Hi, I'm Lenny Ambrose from St. Arnold Brewing Company, proud supporters of Houston Public Media. Right now, with your $60 donation, you can choose tickets to News and Brews. This member-exclusive event takes place February 17th. Enjoy a pint, connect with fellow NPR fans, and meet the Houston Public Media newsroom in person. Select News and Brews tickets when you donate at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is made possible in part by Ellen Benninghoven and Dr. Michael Schaefer, with gifts from listeners like you. South Loop headed west, just past Crestmont, still working that accident in that left lane. East Loop right around Clinton, reports of a car fire as well. 63 degrees right now. It's News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Classroom technology has long been lauded as a necessity, that giving students access to the screens they'll use in everyday life after their education is done is all but required. But we're starting to see cracks in that line of thinking. A new state law bans students' personal cell phone use at public and charter schools. But even at more private schools and even in higher education, there are educators deliberately steering away from screens and establishing low or no tech policies, including no laptops for note-taking. Yes, we are talking about good old-fashioned pen and paper and, looking up and actually talking to one another. It may be back in vogue. Among those implementing the approach is Ben Parris, an assistant professor in the Department of English and Creative Writing at Rice University. Abbie Proell is one of his students. They both join us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let me start with you, Professor Parris. This is not a new practice for you, right? You've been doing this for a little while.
I have. I really started doing it pretty regularly about 12 years ago, I would say, when I began noticing a real sort of excess of laptops, iPads, other kinds of screen-based devices in the classroom. And it started to really, I think, impede my students' ability to pay attention, not just to what I was saying, but equally importantly, to each other.
I've always wondered in those lecture halls where lots of people have laptops, how annoying all the clacking would have to be.
Yeah, that's the case too. I mean, I tend not to teach courses that enroll quite at that level. But even in courses where I would have 35 to 40 students, you would start to notice that sort of a noise distraction. And in those larger lecture halls, I'm sure it must be really tough.
But in the smaller classrooms, class sizes, even when you're talking about something like creative writing, where I would imagine there are a lot of conversations that have to take place around the room more than anything else.
That's exactly right. I think it's so crucial for teachers and students to establish a space where there's an ability to foster dialogue, direct connection, and a kind of like intellectual and empathetic community, right? And all that is so essential for the learning. And I think the screens constantly get in the way of that.
Abbie, I imagine you've taken some classes where technology is welcome and used routinely. And what did you think when you found out you were going to be in this class and there would be no laptops, no cell phones, no digital form of note-taking, and that you would have to, if you needed to write something, put something down, it'd be pen and paper?
I think it's a pretty marked difference. Actually, when I was thinking about joining Dr. Parris's class last fall, another student warned me. They were kind of like, hey, just so you know, if you're thinking about taking it, like there's no laptops, like you need to take all your notes by hand. And so it's a little bit of an adjustment. But I think I've actually really enjoyed it. And I think that the conversations are a lot better. And so it makes me hope that a lot more professors start implementing it.
Can you give maybe an example of a moment of a little bit greater engagement between you and your fellow students and your professor that might not have taken place if you all had been looking down at screens and typing away?
I mean, I think any of them. Like, in English classes especially, I think it's very nerve-wracking to speak up sometimes. And I think that in classes where everybody has their laptops out, it's very easy to, be like, someone will speak up, but it's not going to be me, and kind of put your head in the laptop. And I think there have been moments where maybe something in the text is difficult, nobody really wants to speak up, but like we're all looking at the same book together and everybody's like very present. And so somebody ends up being like, oh, I'm going to take a stab at it and just says something, and like people are not, setting themselves back and just being like, I'm going to send an email,
Right. Professor Parris, we've, even preceding the days of such technology in classrooms, there were often one or two students who would speak up regularly and the rest would put their heads down or be less inclined to engage in the conversation. Do you find, though, now that we've been through this era of technology, that when you have classes where that tech isn't there, that barrier isn't in place, that maybe even some of the students who might be a little less inclined to speak up suddenly start to speak up more?
I think that does happen. I also think it takes a little time. And I think largely because of the ways that students are so used to screens and technology, everyone at first, for the first couple of weeks of class, there's a little bit of a learning curve about how to engage directly with each other again, and it takes some time. But yes, eventually all of the students, including those who tend to be more shy, I think, find it easier to contribute and to sort of be drawn into the conversation, as Abbie was saying, when everyone is doing it with a book, and the discussion is so essential to what we're doing in the class.
What about that argument, though, that, the goal of a college course, any college course, should be to prepare students for whatever life and career will follow, and in those lives and careers, screens are omnipresent, maybe not to the degree they are in the studio, but screens are kind of everywhere. And maybe that should be part of the goal, is to get them used to figuring out a way to communicate with one another, even though those screens are there.
Well, I can appreciate that thought, but I mean, my sense is that now we're in a world where, as you were just saying, screens are everywhere already. So the students don't necessarily need to learn how to either use screens or be in a world mediated by screens. That's what they get all the time. I think what they need, as you yourself put it, for life, as part of their education in the broadest sense, is growing a better, more reliable way of communicating directly with people without the screens. And I think that is actually a very valuable lesson. And I think it's also just something that the students enjoy. They take great pleasure in studying the humanities in that particular way.
Yeah, Abbie, I wonder if after the initial getting used to a different sort of dynamic than what you've seen in lots of other classrooms, is there a point where it's become almost a relief for you? Oh, I'm going into a classroom where I can put all of this technology away and just be present in the moment.
Oh, definitely. I think there are a lot of classes where professors will expect that people are going to be on their laptops. And so, like, you'll be expected to switch very quickly between a bunch of different readings that are online or, like, videos and notebooks and stuff. And it just ends up being very distracting, and I'm easily distracted. And so I think coming into a class where I just know, like, I'm going to have my book and I'm going to have my notebook. And that's it. It's very, like, easy to just focus on whatever the discussion is. And I think it's also encouraged me to kind of start putting my devices away in other classes when I recognize that it's time for like discussion. It's like, you don't need this. It makes you think about when you actually need your technology versus not.
How about outside the classroom? Are you finding yourself trying to put that technology down a little bit more there too?
I mean, I think that's kind of always my goal.
Ben Parris, we've had professors on the show who have been not just embracing technology, but also embracing the development of AI. Some making it part and parcel of their courses. Others have been fighting against it. They have students turn in papers, and they're trying to figure out whether or not this was AI-derived language, and filtering that out gets difficult. What's your take on it in light of the fact that you're trying to keep technology out of at least some classrooms?
Well, my take on it, first and foremost, is it's a bit like the Wild West right now. No one quite knows exactly what's going on. And I think schools, administrators, faculty, we're all kind of scrambling right now to answer those kinds of questions you just asked. Personally, I have an AI-free policy in my classrooms, which makes sense given that we don't have screens. And I recognize that the role of universities is going to be to grapple with AI in complex ways, which will include teaching students how to use AI in various capacities. But here, too, is, I think, an interesting moment where the humanities can actually step up and do something different, because the humanities has always been about educating the person in a complete and holistic sense. And so I like to think that we, as teachers of art, literature, philosophy, and so forth, have a real opportunity to help students realize that learning and growing as a person is best done without the use of AI for certain tasks and approaches, at least. That's what I try to give my students access to in the classroom.
And when it comes to creative writing, I'm curious if there are a lot of folks that are using AI tools and saying, hey, write me a story about this and that and the other thing. And then it spits out language. It's not very good. But I could see how some could think they might think it's passable.
Well,
how do you protect against that?
Well, I personally don't teach creative writing courses because in the English and creative writing department, we have faculty who are focused on creative writing, and then faculty like myself who are more focused on literary history, culture,
it
and
might
analysis.
Be even more of an issue there.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think the temptation is great in both domains, right, for students to use it as a tool. So I think that there, too, is an opportunity for some humanities professors who do want to dive into AI and start to explore the limitations as well as the affordances specifically for humanities work. But personally, I tend to believe that the humanities should strike a path that distinguishes itself against what AI has to offer.
Does that mean, speaking of very practical terms here, term papers that have to be written out as opposed to typed?
No. Well, we have a thing at Rice called the Honor Code. And so I ask students are always expected to abide by the Honor Code in all their classes. And so, my policy is that students don't use AI for any of their assignments. But I try to supplement that directly by having students write drafts and come speak to me in office hours and learn the craft of writing, in a direct, step-by-step manner through dialogue with me. And that's a slower, more difficult, and more challenging process, to be sure. But it's one that ultimately is, for them, much more rewarding, I think. And it's something that they can bank on for the rest of their lives.
And otherwise, what are they doing in college anyway?
Exactly. Right? That goes back to the point about educating the whole person in a lasting and durable manner.
Benjamin Parris is an assistant professor in the Department of English and Creative Writing at Rice University. Abbie Proell is a student at Rice. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just ahead, your gardening questions for Meg Tapp from the Garden Club of Houston. You can send those now to talk@houstonmatters.org or call 713-440-8870. And stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Support comes from Sunny.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now to Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Media comes from listeners like you and from Central Market, celebrating Valentine's Day with floral bouquets and arrangements, chocolates, sparkling wines, and more. More at centralmarket.com.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, American Experience presents a two-part documentary about Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. Watch part 1 of LBJ tonight at 9 on TV 8.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. On the second Monday of every month, we set aside time on this program to field your questions about whatever is or is not growing in your yard. We talk with Meg Tapp from the Garden Club of Houston. You can call or text us now at 713-440-8870. You can email us at talk@houstonmatters.org. You can also post a question in the chat on our video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Meg Tapp, good morning. Welcome.
Look at that. So many ways to reach us.
Yes,
I love
indeed.
that.
As we await those questions, Saturday is Valentine's Day. Seems like this is a good week to talk about flowers as a gift. First, let's focus on people who are giving flowers from their gardens. Then we'll get to the ones who receive them and how to care for them. What steps should you take before picking out and cutting flowers from your garden to give to someone? What's the best way to make sure future flowers grow?
Here, I thought you were going to ask me to be your Valentine, and this is how it turns out.
Okay, first question. Will you be my Valentine?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Now, moving on to the questions.
Yeah, to what people care about.
Right.
So roses are obviously what's very typical of Valentines. That they actually are... Roses are a funny thing because they are so beautiful, but they're really not even grown here. Most of them are flown in from Ecuador. It's kind of like a not great thing to be doing because it's super chemically. And I mean, they have been very much treated to make them last that long, to make no bugs come into the country with them. And so it's not in my view, it's not the best thing to give somebody.
Is that something that people can grow successfully here in Houston?
Yes. So again, generally roses are chemically, but there is I have not bought anything from them yet, but I was researching it because I would like to. There's apparently 4 nurseries in the whole world, one of them being in Florida, and it's called Angel Nursery. Again, I got nothing, I'm not making any money off that, but they're organically grown roses. And it seems to be, from looking at the website, it looked to be kind of like this mom and pop thing that they have a list of what they have, of whether they got sun, shade, what growing zone, and they're in Florida, so it's all very similar to what we could do.
Right. I'm talking about Houstonians planting and growing roses
right,
themselves.
But I'm saying you buy them if you buy them from this.
Buy the seeds and
No. You have to buy a plant always.
Yeah.
So a rose is very rarely just a rose. That's the plant. It's a hybrid of 2 things. So because generally when you hybridize something, that means you're going to make it super custom to whatever you want its characteristics to be. But simplified, you can just pick 2 things that you're going to change. So or that you want to. The characteristics that you want to grow for, you can just pick 2. So you couldn't pick flowers all the time, disease resistant, likes the heat, and can tolerate freezing cold. Like that's too many things. So the people who create them by hybridizing them pick 2 things. So the reason I was thinking this thing in Florida would be great because that's our same kind of climate, so they would have things that work for us. But what you would decide is you can grow them here, and it would be great if you could do it organically. If they started out organically, that means the grower got them all the way to that stage to ship them to you organically, and you could continue that. So the one thing they need in general, all of them, is sun, and they need airflow. They get part of the problem in Houston, and I would assume Florida, is we're very humid, and if there's not a lot of airflow through the plant, then it just keeps a little humidity dome kind of trapped on the leaves. So it's not like it has to be just sitting out in the middle of your yard, but I wouldn't think like 5 of them bunched up against the corner of a fence where it just can't get the air to run through it. But yes, you can grow them here, and you just have to decide if you want like a climber, which is what you have to train up a trellis or something like that, which can be absolutely beautiful. And pretty much all roses can tolerate our cold.
How about other flowers, other possibilities that you would say, oh, those could look pretty nice and be, you could probably get them to bloom this week?
Well, what I actually love is orchids. Orchids have such a weird rap. Like, everyone thinks they're very difficult to grow. Seriously, like at the grocery store, they are like $19 for a plant, and that will grow. You can have that for 20 years, and it will grow. It will rebloom every single year. It's beautiful when you give it. The blooms last for quite a couple of weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks, and then once it finishes blooming, you just cut the leaves stay, and then you cut the stalk where the flowers were. Cut it, put it outside in the shade, water it a bunch, and then we'll do it again later. So that's a very long-term one, and it's very pretty and easy to travel with. You don't have to, someone doesn't have to have a vase if you're going to give it to somebody. You don't have to do that whole thing.
All right. So flip side, if you receive flowers this Valentine's Day, what can you do to sustain them, make sure that the blooming flowers last as many days as possible? I'm going to bring it back to alcohol, as I do. Plants love alcohol, even in the morning. So does it have to be like a mimosa or something in the morning?
It has to be something with an umbrella, but besides that. No, but like a gin or vodka is what they like, and they just need a tiny splash in their water. And what that is it's sugar for them, and it's carbohydrate, and that's how they would have been feeding themselves if they were still on their plant. So it for sure comes with the little packet from the nursery or from the florist. So open the packet, put it in the water, do those instructions, but you need to change the water every day. So that packet is gone once you change the water on the second day. So if you just put a splash, tiny, seriously, a couple drops in the water of alcohol, it keeps them blooming longer, and that can also revive them. If you've let them go, if you put a little more alcohol in the water, it will perk them up. But that's great. And whenever you're in the grocery store, you can also just stop by the I guess it's the flower shop part of the grocery store, and they just usually have big bowls on the counter of the little packets of food, and so you can just take. They do not mind. You don't take the whole bowl, but they don't mind if you just pick those up every now and again to keep your plants alive.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. On the second Monday of each month, we field your gardening questions for Meg Tapp from the Garden Club of Houston. You can call or text 713-440-8870. You can email us at talk@houstonmatters.org. You can also post the question on our video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We also had freezing weather a couple of weeks ago. What can we do about any dead plants in our gardens after a freeze?
So in general, you'd leave them alone, but we're actually we're mid-February now, so I think it's okay to go ahead and start kind of cleaning it up. If anything's mushy, if it were any kind of plant that's not just dead, like didn't just freeze and it just looks like a stick with no leaves, but if it's truly mushy, you need to get that out of there right away, because that's all bacteria and stuff, and it will ruin the whole plant, because most plants survive just fine. So you don't want to prune your plants and clean up what's dead, except for we're not talking about the mushy stuff anymore. You don't want to clean and prune your stuff in case we do get another snap of cold, and then you will have just exposed all the way down to what was still living and thriving. But I personally am getting started on it just because I feel like we're done. And but if you want to wait, you can. But you certainly can do it by the end of the month.
Is it a sign, if you have a plant that has survived the freeze, that's a plant that'll handle additional freezes in the future, that you can just look at and say, okay, hey, no reason to mess with that one. That one's in good shape.
Yes. And so now's a good time in winter in general to go ahead and prune, just if something were getting unwieldy or if it was encroaching on where you walk or sit or something, just to clean it up and tidy it up. That's certainly reasonable to do now. Things that are spring bloomers like azaleas, you don't want to cut them back no matter what happened, because they have spent the whole winter setting their blooms. You can't necessarily see them, but they're in there. So if you lop them off now, you will have nothing to bloom in March, because you will have just lopped it off. So if it's a spring bloomer, if it blooms in March and April, let it be. But everything else you can clean up. And you can always clean up anything throughout the year at any time, not a full like Edward Scissorhands situation, but at any time you just need to tidy something up. It's not like you have to think, okay, is this the exact right time to prune it? Because it's just a haircut.
Is there any threat to flowers, plants, or crops in our garden in having wild swings in temperatures like we've experienced? You know, we had freezing conditions for a few days. Today it's in the 70s. It's going to be beautiful. We go up and down this time of year, some yo-yoing temperatures. Are there some that just can't handle that?
The more specialized things, like the things that were not really ever meant to be here, yes. So like some things from, well, okay, if you do natives, those have been here. They were native to this area. So they are used to this because this is happening this year. It probably happened last year, skipped a few years before that, then happened 3 years in a row, something like that. They're used to it. Things are changing in general, but the plants are adaptive they're alive just like we are. So if their environment is changing over time, they're adapting to it because they have been native for hundreds of years. And so they have adapted because things are different than they were 100 years ago. Because if you think about it, we've had some huge freezes in our history of a city, and they're still the same. There are native plants that were around then, so they made it. So they are used to it. And if you can plant natives, like I really have done almost all natives. I don't. If something dies, then I don't plant it with something that's not native. And I have to say, I still have like little traveler birds coming through, eating berries and things like that. It's actually a really nice habitat, and you don't have to worry about it as much. It doesn't look great right this second, but I'm not worried about it.
Can you give one good resource for figuring out whether or not a given plant is a native plant or not?
Yes, there is. Well, yeah, there's Lady Bird. So Lady Bird Johnson has a wildflower center in Austin, and they have a huge native plant database, and the whole country uses that. So even, in Missouri Botanical Garden, that's who they refer you to. So it's this huge database run out of Austin, which is great that it's our state, but it's Lady Bird Wildflower Center. And you can just Google native Texas or native Austin, and it'll probably come up. But that's a good resource. You can put it in there, and that will tell you all. If you're trying to figure out what would look good or what could grow, so Ladybird is not particularly intuitive. It doesn't. It's kind of technical, but it's great because it's the definitive one. But there is a website called Prairie Nursery, and I think it's out of, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of the country. But they have a great website, and it's for buying plants. You do not need to buy plants from them, but they have, like, you tell them sun, shade, what growing zone you're in. If it's native, you can pick your state, and it'll come up with what you need. So you click on it, and it'll show you the native range. It'll show you the map of where it's native, and it tells you a lot about it. So that's a great resource, and it's kind of pretty just to go through there.
If we didn't get to a question you'd like to ask, or you think of one later, you can email it to us at talk@houstonmatters.org. You can also text us anytime at 713-440-8870. We'll address it next time. Meg Tapp is with the Garden Club of Houston, which is hosting a free and open to the public horticulture lecture this week by Amy Stewart, author of The Tree Collectors, The Drunken Botanist, and Wicked Plants, among other books. That takes place Wednesday morning at 10 at St. Martin's Episcopal Church. Meg, as always, thanks very much.
All right, I hope to see y'all out there.
Still to come, the Super Bowl's over, the Olympics are in full swing, but here in Houston, it's time to talk about basketball and the Rockets as they reach the All-Star break later this week. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row.
My name is Emily Hines, and I'm the producer for Grown Up Storytime. I would describe Grown Up Storytime as a casual storytelling event that is multi-level because it's someone telling someone else's story. So you get to hear both a writer's perspective and a storyteller's perspective on top of it. When the show is starting, it does have kind of a typical theater feel because there's music playing and there's lights on, and then everyone kind of settles down, and then you'll see Blair and I go up and introduce the show.
Welcome to Grown Up Storytime.
The stories are usually nonfiction, which works better because people want to hear interesting things that happen to you and they relate to that. That way, if you say, this crazy thing that happened to me, everyone probably has a story like that. I think the thing that makes story time so fun for people is that they're usually relatable.
Chuck dropped his arm by several degrees and balled his hand into a fist. The game had changed. He was going for a fist bump. Inwardly, I castigated myself for making such a dumb mistake. Of course he was a fist bump guy. I should have seen it coming. Chuck was cool. He probably played the guitar. He could survive in the woods. I couldn't even play kazoo, and I cried at the end of Shrek.
I usually say when new people are writing stories is that the first thing to do is just to write it all out without stopping. Don't stop to edit yourself while you're writing it. Just get it all out there. And then after that, you can go back and kind of clean it up. I'm Emily Hines from Houston, and you're listening to Houston Matters with Craig Cohen.
Much of what we know about our...
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul. Music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider committed to helping Texas communities and emphasizing safety. More at texasmutual.com/TexansGetIt.
A lot of national chatter over sports this morning will probably focus on opinions about last night's Super Bowl commercials and halftime show. Certainly not the game, which was pretty one-sided. On the international stage, the world's focused on the Winter Olympics. Back here in Houston, though, we need to talk about basketball as the Houston Rockets reach the All-Star break later this week, while right in the thick of it in a battle for position in the NBA Western Conference. Kris Gardner covers basketball and owns the Houston Roundball Review. Kris, welcome back to Houston Matters.
Thank you very much. It's always great to be here.
The Rockets just won a big game Saturday, defeating the first-placed Oklahoma City Thunder 112-106. The Thunder still 7 games ahead of the Rockets and own the best record in the NBA at 40-13. Would you characterize Saturday's victory as a statement game for the Rockets?
I don't believe in statement games in February. It was important to win the game. How they did it came from behind down, I think, by as much as 15 points. The way they did it, got back to Rockets basketball, physical, defensive basketball. They stopped turning over the basketball, which is important. That's how they got behind by so much in that first half. And it was good to see Alperen Şengün back up his words that he said a previous game that he needs to play better, like an all-star.
He had a triple-double, and in fact, he will be an injury replacement at the All-Star game this weekend. Are you surprised that he wasn't named to the All-Star team in the first place?
Not really. I mean, there's so many talented players in the Western Conference, and it's tough to choose. But I'm not surprised he was named as the first replacement, especially now in this new format of basically international versus the United States. So he was next in line behind Canada's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
And I guess that means, based off of that format, that he'll be opposing Kevin Durant in the game?
Yes. So, I mean, it's NBA is trying to boost ratings for the All-Star game. So this is the latest machination of them trying to generate interest in the game that's just fallen off a cliff in terms of ratings because the players don't play as hard as they used to.
Every league seems to deal with this with their All-Star games, Pro Bowls, and the like. The trade deadline just passed, and the Rockets were just one of 3 teams not to make a move, despite the fact that Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams are both injured and done for the year. Did that surprise you at all?
It surprised me somewhat, but they are so up against the first salary cap apron. So General Manager Rafael Stone really kind of hung his hat on that was the reason why they did not pull off a deal. I think they may try to get somebody in the free agent buyer's market before playoff rosters are finalized March 1st. So that's probably their next option. But they really are going to ride with the guys they have on the current roster.
ESPN reported in recent days that James Harden was interested in returning to the Rockets, but the Rockets were not interested in having him return. Is that maybe to you a good sign that Rockets management, they have a concept, an approach, they've been pursuing it, they've maybe gotten over what past management regimes thought about chasing stars that don't really fit the team game they've been building?
Not really, because you look, they acquired Kevin Durant. But the way James Harden left the Rockets, he burned a lot of bridges. You know, how he did it, what he said, his words and his actions. I was glad to see the Rockets decide not to take that step back and open the door up and welcome him back, because it was time to move on. Thank you, James, for your time here. You're great here, but no, sir, you can't come back.
I have had the impression this year, I thought Durant has seemed to be more of a team player, certainly, than what we saw from Harden on his way out the door. Am I getting a false impression or maybe rose-colored glasses about this year's team?
No, I think Kevin Durant has never really been a vocal leader. He's more a leader by example. With the injuries to key people on the Rocket staff, you talk about Fred VanVleet and now Steven Adams, but earlier Dorian Finney-Smith. Durant has played more minutes than he and the Rocket staff probably expected thus far this season, but he's made the most of it, and they're still right in the thick of it for the Western Conference playoffs.
The Rockets are now 32-19, 10-5 over the last month. That includes a couple of losses before Saturday's victory, so they were on a 9-3 run there prior to that. When they are on, what is it that the Rockets are doing so right?
Rebounding, of course. Three-pointers, they're not a high-volume three-point shooting team, but they capitalize on the corner threes that they get. Tari Eason, second in the league in three-point shooting, which has surprised me. I keep waiting for him to regress to the mean. He hasn't yet, so kudos to his offseason work for doing that. But the Rockets have to play their style. That's physical, that's focused, that's aggressive. And when teams kind of match that physicality, the Rockets have to respond to it accordingly and not turn over so much as well.
When they are off, what is it they're struggling with most? Is it turnovers?
Turnovers.
Yeah.
Turnovers. Because Fred VanVleet was a veteran presence, the point guard, the leader on the floor. He helped calm things down, get the players in the right spots. His absence is missed in key situations, fourth quarter especially against certain opponents. And I think his absence, there's a chance he may try to return before the playoffs. I'm not really pushing that, because I think you should just take the ACL injury and heal on its own time rather than a playoff push for it. But Amen Thompson and Reed Shepherd, growing pains, playing point guard, on the job training really for them. So they do have their bumps on the road.
The Rockets have a couple more games before the All-Star break, but let's look ahead a little bit. What do you see as the key to success for the Rockets moving up in the Western Conference standings, and maybe even if they get on a bit of a run here, maybe potentially challenging the Thunder closer to the top of the standings?
Reed Shepherd, not turning it over so much. Reed Shepherd being a better defensive player one-on-one, not help side, but also Alperen Sengun being more engaged consistently on the defensive end. He has to bring it every game. He can't afford to take, he nor the Rockets can afford for him to take games off where he goes through the motions. If his offense, if he's missing shots, he cannot let that affect his defense. He has to impact the game in other ways for the team to win.
Kris Gardner covers basketball and owns the Houston Roundball Review. Kris, as always, thanks for talking with us.
My pleasure as always. Take care.
And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. Remember, you can check out Houston Matters anytime, subscribe to our podcast for the audio, or visit Houston Public Media's YouTube channel for the video. On tomorrow's show, we look ahead to the upcoming North American Prospect Expo Summit here in Houston and how deals made at it can affect energy policy, companies, and consumers. Also Tuesday, how caregivers can navigate challenging behavior from a loved one dealing with dementia. We talk with a neuroscientist and community health worker who is discussing it at a conference in town this week. Plus, whether reputations some Houston metro area towns and neighborhoods have are deserved. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
This Valentine's Day, give a Houston Public Media membership to your loved one.